Dan Rooney's son, Art, summed up his father's life earlier today. He said he gave his heart and soul to the Steelers, the National Football League, and the city of Pittsburgh. Dan Rooney died today. He was 84 years old. Rooney took over as the Steelers president in 1975. Building primarily through the draft, Rooney picked future Hall of Famers who led the Steelers to 4 titles that decade. But his influence extended beyond his own franchise. The Rooney Rule, that's named for Dan Rooney, and it created opportunities for minority coaches and executives who had often been overlooked in the hiring process previously. Reaction poured in Thursday from the NFL and beyond. Bill Cowher, former Steelers head coach and now broadcaster, tweeting, "R.I.P. Dan, my mentor and friend, thank you for your guidance and wisdom. I came a young man and left a better man. Your spirit will live forever." Former Steelers star Troy Polamalu tweeted, "We've lost the heart and soul of Steeler Nation. Incredible person, humanitarian, and true patriot. May his memory be eternal. Love you, Papa Rooney." And President Barack Obama also released a statement on the passing of Dan Rooney. Rooney served as the ambassador to Ireland under President Obama. His statement said, "I know the people of Pittsburgh who loved him not only for the Super Bowl championships he brought as the owner of the Steelers, but for his generosity of spirit. Mourn his passing today. Michelle and I offer our condolences to the Rooney family, some of the most gracious and thoughtful people we know, even as we celebrate the life of Dan Rooney, a championship caliber good man." It's great to have John Clayton here to discuss Dan Rooney's life and legacy. John was building his career as a reporter in the 70s in Pittsburgh, just as Rooney was ascending the Steelers hierarchy. So, John, what recollections or personal experiences with Rooney did you think about Thursday when you heard the news of his passing?
So many, because in many ways, he started my career. I was a 17-year-old person from Churchill High School. I was able to get a press pass, thanks to Dan Rooney and Joe Gordon of the Pittsburgh Steelers, to send 2 stories each week to the St. Mary's Daily Press. This is in 1972, just when the Steelers were starting to become good. And Dan was the one who endorsed it. And I still remember going to one of the first practices in training camp in St. Vincent College, standing next to Dan, introducing myself, having him at least allow me to cover the team, which turned out to be one of the greatest dynasties in Super Bowl history. And then through the years, being able to, get information from him and talk to him about collective bargaining agreements. I still remember back in 1983, I actually was sitting there in the draft, as we were for a long period of time. I came to him, I said, "Hey, I got an idea. You can actually make a trade for Dan Marino if you would offer this." And so he takes it into Chuck Noll, and he says, "Hey, that's a pretty good idea. Where'd that come from?" He said, "John Clayton." He's like, "Nah, can't do that."
So you could have altered the landscape of one of the great franchises and one of the great careers in NFL history. That's a great story there. So where does Dan Rooney fit in terms of the history of the league?
Well, history of the league, but I think history of sports, too, because you know he's a Hall of Famer, and deservedly so. He was the one who hired Chuck Noll and set up the organization, which was so good with people that now it was good with people, but great with talent. But also, his legacy is how he shared and sometimes, went not against the team, but was so involved with the league. Sometimes it wasn't necessarily helping the Steelers. I mean, the Steelers didn't have the biggest payroll, couldn't afford the biggest payroll. But yet, Dan Rooney was the one who kept advancing the game of football. You saw it in the Rooney Rule. You saw it in what he's done with collective bargaining agreement. And he got along so well with everybody. When things were contentious in the negotiating circle in the CBA, he would be able to get a phone call in, go meet with Gene Upshaw, and something got done. And again, it's not just football, but sports in general. He set up one of the model franchises and has had some of the greatest success in sports history.
All right, John, great to have your insight on that story. There's another story that you could speak to, the Marshawn Lynch story, as he apparently prepares to come back to the NFL. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Here's a look at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette with a headline, and that's Heinz Field lit up in Dan Rooney's honor. Heinz Field, one of 2 stadiums in which the Steelers played under his watch and that he oversaw. Dan Rooney, Steelers legend, private burial scheduled for Tuesday. He was 84 years old.